All right. Hello, folks. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marielle. I'm a senior marketing manager at Replicated. I'm focusing on customer value, and today we'll be kicking off with a overview of our new adoption features before we get into a roundtable discussion. And with that, I will pass it over to Dex to share the exciting things we've been building around adoption.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marielle. Cool. So we're cooking up some fun new stuff in Replicated that we're super stoked to announce. We'll be launching in the next few days. This is adoption reporting being launched into beta, which means it's going to be on for everybody. We look forward to having you get in there and use it and play around with the new features. Here's a quick screenshot example of the chart showing adoption of new versions as well as some key metrics. We'll get into what those mean in a minute. The really goal here, and starting with the why, is helping y'all understand how quickly customers are adopting new versions of your software. What is the distribution of software versions across your user base? Which of my customers are stuck on old versions, and which versions are they stuck on? How effective are our communication and marketing efforts for new releases? How is my release cadence impacting software adoption? And even some more strategic stuff, like where are my biggest product adoption bottlenecks? Where do I need to be focusing? And am I getting better or worse at these things over time, week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter? Before we get into the product, I want to go over a couple of the key metrics that we go through here. The first one is adoption rate. So that'll be the percent of users, or the percent of instances running in the field that are on one of your last 3 versions. We've also got age of deployed software, which depending on your release cadence may be more interesting to you, but this would be take all of your instances running in the field, order them by the age of release that they are running, and pick whatever's in the middle. And this will give you a kind of interesting heuristic for how old overall is your software that's running in the field. How good are you doing at keeping people on the latest version? And then the last one is unique deployed versions. It's a little more towards the engineering support persona of just how many versions out there in the field are live that we need to maintain internal support knowledge, customer-facing documentation, and just general expertise on. The higher this number gets, the more complex your support process is bound to be. That's it for metrics. Let's get into the product. So if you are logged in and once this feature launches, you'll be able to navigate here and you'll see the report at the top of your customers page. There's some toggles here. You can filter by license type. You can zoom in and out here to see different numbers. You could pick the channel that you want to see statistics for, and you can copy a link to this report and send it to other folks on your team. Now, this is all on top of a lot of the other customer instance information that we've made available, and it kind of builds from here. So if you wanted to dig into specific customers and understand their versions and uptime, you could do that as well. But that's kind of the core of the features, just to frame this debate a little bit and what we're doing at Replicated around adoption and helping y'all improve your adoption performance. And we look forward to hearing from y'all on what you think of the feature and what you want to see next. I'll pass it back to Marielle.
All right, thank you, Dex. Okay, so now we're going to kick off the roundtable. So I'm going to bring a few more people on video here. Give them a moment to join. And kind of as you join, I'm going to have you kind of do introductions. So Andrew, if you want to start.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Andrew Storms. I'm the head of security for Replicated. And I think in terms of our discussion here today, I'm going to bring that security voice into what it means for metrics, and how can we better use them to help our enterprise customers and their security concerns. Next.
I'll have Ian.
Yep. I'm Ian Zink, Senior Developer Advocate here at Replicated. I obviously have a lot of interest in seeing customers adopt and use these metrics to advance their developer experience. And even in a past life, I was very involved in trying to get customers to adopt their software. So I have a lot of interest there as well. So.
All right, and Lance?
Thanks, Marielle. I'm Lance. I head solutions at Opal. If you haven't heard at Opal, we're helping folks secure the identity perimeter, making complicated access much more simple and helping security and compliance teams ultimately reduce the amount of access that IT folks in IT have to manage and what engineers have, and ultimately trying to help people be more productive around their identity and access management problems. Other thing I'll say is, fortunately at Opal, I work in pre-sales and post-sales, so I'm actually responsible for all of our customer deployments on Replicated. So I'm very familiar with the Replicated solution, and it's been a great accelerator here for us getting folks to adopt Opal.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll dive into the questions here. So first up is what data points can people track or measure to understand how well customers are doing at installing new versions of their software?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start there. And I think, or Andrew, do you want to take that one?
No, go ahead. I was going to jump in. I was going to ask Mario, who was that directed towards? But it's probably directed towards all of us. Go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, and Andrew, you can tell me how well I'm doing. Obviously at Opal, we're always trying to improve, so maybe you can find a few points here where we can be a little bit better. But I think at the highest level, we would look very closely at tracking product level metrics on things that we're actively developing in Dex. That's why I really like the dashboards that you showed, is because it's much easier now to see these things just in one really accessible view. And Andrew, what this means for us is if we see a drop in adoption, typically it means that we're not actually solving problems for our on-premise customers. And I think, for our cloud product, we have a lot more in-depth, metrics, but it's super binary for Replicated because people are either upgrading or they're not. So we get that feedback really, really quickly. And I think if they're not upgrading, right, it allows us to have a conversation around, the product direction, right? We get that feedback in just such a simple and easy to understand way for these deployments.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback, Lance. One thing I was going to say generally is, I think being curious is a really good attribute to have here. So being able to look at those metrics and ask yourself questions of why they are what they are and in what direction they're moving. I also think that historically we've had a persona that uses Replicated, and it's not always a product manager per se. And now that we're introducing these metrics, it kind of broadens the personas and the usage of the product, so that, let's say you're maybe an engineer or a release manager and you're using Replicated, now is a great opportunity to broaden the users of Replicated to give those metrics to people like your product management, for instance, or even your security team, so they can start to become more curious about what their enterprise customers are doing with your software.
All right, Dexter, did you have anything to add before we move on to the next question?
I think that covers that one.
I think it's super interesting that, a thing I hear a lot is, in the on-prem world, we have less product signals from our customers. We're getting less data from how people are using it. And I thought that was fascinating, Lance, your take on, yeah, we can't tell you how many users were active on a given day for all of our enterprise customers, but the fact that they're not upgrading is almost a bigger and more clear feedback that, hey, we're not excited to get whatever's in the new version. And that's feedback on, hey, whatever we shipped or however we marketed it maybe wasn't enough to get them to want to go through the effort of the upgrade. However streamlined that might be, it's still more so than just reloading a browser tab usually.
All right. So what data points can people track or measure to understand the overall security performance of distributed software?
That would probably be directed towards me, the security person here.
I
think I'll take the question slightly differently and maybe reframe it to be, what value can we be adding to the security personnel at the enterprise customers? And I think we take one step back, which is, we're very accustomed these days to the SaaS deployment model where it is, like Dex said earlier, it's the reload and you've got a new app kind of thing. Whereas in the enterprise world, if you haven't worked in that space, there's going to be much more strict controls around the upgrade cadence and the approvals, and maybe there's change windows involved. And even before you get to the change window, there's probably some testing that's done. There's probably some governance. There's probably some compliance steps they need to be checking. And so part of understanding and going back to the idea of being curious is to ask your enterprise customers who are running your products, in their premise, what are those steps they go through? And I think as a great product manager, just to ask the question, be curious what they go, what all the things they have to check, whether they're check boxes or testing scenarios, whatever it is. And going back to your question, Mario, from a security perspective, one of the things we pretty much always do when we get handed a new release is we're going to look at what's changed. And so whether that's in the form of a textual change log, a README file, but we're also going to start asking questions like, what specific components maybe have changed, whether it's included libraries or even versions of those libraries. Now, we may have requirements around that for example, we may not be allowed to run OpenSSL version X kind of thing. And so one of the things that we can do when we're distributing software to our enterprise customers is help them along with that. So for example, something like SBOM, where it's called software bill of materials, where you can actually display, here are all the components within my new release, and here's what's changed kind of thing. That will help the security team to kind of move along through their processes that they usually have to perform before the upgrade happens. So in terms of, metrics, right, we're clearly going to be looking at what is the cadence. How often are they updating? Is there a reliable maybe pattern to it? Maybe it's every month, or maybe it's only every quarter or twice a year kind of thing. And I think from a metrics perspective, that helps you better understand the enterprise customer and also can help you align, say, your release to their schedules. And I'll put something on top of that, which is if you have the ability to say, I've released the product and say 90 days later, they've taken the upgrade, you can also get a sense then of how long it takes them to actually do this kind of security checks and compliance and governance all around those upgrades. So I think the point here is metrics just aren't about how quickly they're adopting, but also the cadence and the schedules that they're adopting the software when we're delivering it to them. And I think that can help us with the adoption metrics in general. So,
I think this is such an interesting topic in many ways, because oftentimes this metric and security are opposed to one another, right? Like security is trying to analyze things, take things real slow, when really in the interest often of security, you want to move faster. And I think the kind of platforms we're offering and the kind of platforms we're moving to in the future, we should see better alignment there as we start to show security. By adopting faster, you're remediating these things. By using these cloud native platforms, you're going to improve all these specific metrics. Because so often, I've seen security teams, when you want to do something more cloud native, and they'll be really uneasy because maybe it's not their golden image or something like that, right? They want the specific set. And I think these metrics can start to help kind of knock down some of those concerns and, kind of work with them to kind of create controls and things around them.
I think you bring up a really interesting point there, Ian. And I'll take it one step further in that you could potentially benchmark customers against each other in terms of their upgrade cadence and use that as proof that the software is operationally sound. And let me provide kind of a better example there instead of something lofty, which is if 95% of all your customers are upgrading on a regular cadence, and they're doing so error-free, and you find the 5% who are maybe taking 6 months or 9 months to do the upgrade, and you ask them, and they could be saying, oh, that's because we need more time to bake it in or to test it, or we never take the new version because of X, Y, and Z. You could use the metrics within the product to show them proof that 95% of my customers are upgrading without problem, and you're kind of in the laggard. So perhaps that will provide you a little bit more trust in our releases and the release cadence and process, that you could probably accept it more often and quicker. So you might be able to help using, again, going back, benchmarking, maybe somewhat peer pressure without necessarily releasing names per se of customers who are fast or slow, but to be able to show an aggregate, people are taking the software very quickly and without problems. What can I do to build better trust for you, enterprise customer X, to upgrade more often like everybody else is doing?
So that relates really well into our next question, which is tell us about how release cadence or deployment frequency can impact your adoption metrics and security. I don't know if Lance or Dex, if you want to kick this one off.
Yeah, Dex, I'm happy to start here. And Andrew, I liked what you said. And I think for us using Replicated as a technology, it's really removed a lot of the lower value activities around, managing and packaging the app and all the infrastructure, that abstraction so valuable to us. And I think that ultimately means we have more control to focus on the positive things, like building more trust. That's like, we control it, right? But the sort of deployment model isn't as big of a part of it. And I think that plays into the release cadence, pretty nicely. So Andrew, we're holistic. Obviously, it's a balance for us. Regular updates show that we're bringing new things to market, hopefully that people care about and that it's actively maintained. But, even though Replicated is extremely easy, too frequent updates can overwhelm folks with what I would call update fatigue, Andrew. And again, in the larger accounts where there's more people, process, and platform to consider, training, how user experiences can change. We do have to manage that. So I think, as an early stage company, we gather a lot of feedback from our customers to understand, what works best. And in certain scenarios, Andrew, Replicated allows us to give, controls over what we might feature flag for an on-premise customer or a few on-premise customers if we're concerned that it's, might be a really big change. So we might test it, with one or two, folks before pushing it out to the broader base. So Andrew, it seems to me it's been more of an art, with some objective science behind it for us. But again, what I love is just Replicated allows us to focus on the things that actually deliver a lot of value through that process, not just training people on how to, deploy our managed applications. So from that perspective, it's been great for us.
Are you using feature flags pretty extensively, or is that something you're just starting to ramp up on?
It is. We've had pretty good success with it, Ian. So Launch Sharkly, that's been our platform, and generally for most major things, we do try. We've just found that iterative process and being able to selectively give it to folks who are the right customers and tune it. We're trying to make that more of a kind of a standard here, Ian, as we go forward. So it's ramping up for sure.
That's really cool. I mean, I absolutely think that's like on the right path of like, how do you increase your release cadence? And I think that's what really huge SaaS companies do as well, is right. They start to leverage these feature flags, and yeah, I could probably do a whole talk with you just on feature flags and on-prem, because that's a really exciting. I like, it's been out there for a while, but like the tooling's gotten so much more advanced, and using that to drive your adoption rate faster makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I think some of the hard challenges, Ian, and I don't want to take us too far off track, but like for someone who's air gapped, and we have all sorts of use cases where SaaS doesn't make sense, right? Connecting to a really sensitive internal tool, FedRAMP, even data sovereignty in some cases. We're trying to build a really scalable and secure cloud platform, but again, this platform gives us that choice. I think that's hard is sometimes the feature flagging, Ian, is like managed from the cloud. So in an air gap environment, we might actually not, even from a network topology, be able to deliver some of that. So again, we're in that experimentation phase, but I think the more you can deliver a cloud operating model, on-prem, that can be the best of both worlds. And you and Dex, Andrew, both, talked about that as well.
So, question to dig a little deeper on that. Like, do you know kind of what the target or actual release cadence is for the Opal dev engineering team? Are they doing every 6 weeks, every month, once a quarter? How often are you releasing?
I want to be careful on what I say. I'm speaking for some of the product folks, but we're and they'd be like,
Okay.
Lance, yeah, you said that to the whole world. Now we have to do it. No, I'm just kidding. So we're definitely, we try to be, pretty agile. We're absolutely pushing, multiple, releases a quarter. And I think at our stage, that aggressiveness and the ability to rapidly iterate on our feedback with the team we have, Dex, that's our advantage. So we're really focused heavily on optimizing that way, Andrew, but we're trying to be objective and make sure that we don't, trip over our skis at the same time. But speed is critical for us, Dex, both for, our cloud customers and for those who have chosen our self-hosted offering.
Cool.
All right. How do you help customers gain confidence with that releases won't break their systems?
So this one was my question, so I can kind of kick this one off and what I'm thinking about this. And so we had a lot. I worked at Pivotal previously, and we had a lot of issues making customers confident that, especially because Pivotal was a very broad app platform with a lot of different things and a lot of edge cases, and that really hurt our adoption rate. Right, was like this kind of long testing cycle. Like you would end up, maybe Sandbox would have like the latest version, and then like Dev would get a little older, and then production might be really old, and then they could almost kind of get stuck in their ways. And so I just kind of wanted to kick off a discussion there on how do we think customers should be doing this to really be confident, and what on the vendor side can we do to maintain that trust so we don't end up in the situation where customers don't trust you, right? And so they're willing to adopt quicker.
Andrew, I led on the last one. I'm happy to take a stab. I think it's a great question, Ian, but I'll defer for a second here if there's any takers.
I was going to perhaps repeat what I said earlier about the data usually is indicative of itself of if you have majority of your customers taking the upgrades, adopting the new software on a regular cadence, within some small amount of days since the release, that in itself is usually perhaps an indirect metric that the software releases are good and have a lot of reliability and value to them. And I think you're also, again, like I said earlier, you're looking for the outliers, the signals that don't tell you that. And you have to ask the question, are you in a position, do you have the data that says, 99 or 95% of the customers are taking and adopting the new software regularly at a good cadence, and there's only the 5% who aren't? So we need to ask that 5%. Or is it perhaps flipped, which is what we hope it's not, which is there's only the 5% who are doing the upgrades on a regular basis. And in that case, you might have a bigger problem that is indicative of maybe trustworthy or reliable software that you need to go dig into and figure out like what's going on there. Go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And maybe just some quick, tactical things, Ian, we're doing. So, testing, obviously there's, in the code test, but we do small bug bashes. We always try to have a solutions engineer, Dex, who's working with that customer problem space to help the engineers test. Those are just practical things, Ian, we can do cross-functionally. The phased rollouts, right? Especially being able to target, what's going to cloud versus what's going to self-hosted. And, if we can feature flag some of that stuff, Ian, then we can maybe, minimize something we miss, but try it with a, customer who's a good candidate and really eager. And then finally, Ian, we actually productize some of the testing capabilities in our product. So Opal has what we call like a read-only or dry run mode, where it will stage changes that it might make against, giving someone access to AWS or, Azure AD or Okta, but it won't actually make them. So typically, Andrew, that would be on in like a dev and staging environment, but not on for production. So I think it's holistic. And, if we do those things on the ground, Andrew, then we feel like the data that's going to product, there's less variables, and then they can, more like in aggregate, see how we're doing. So I think it's a mix, Ian, and it works best when all the teams, rally around the customer, as we know.
So that's really interesting hearing, the dev test prod, that your customers are kind of adopting that kind of methodology too. What kind of lag are you seeing for on-prem between those, if any? Like, is it days, months, like weeks, or?
It depends on the size of the customer typically, and I spent some time, talking with Dex too on what we've done. We have like a lot of Terraform starters, like spinning up sort of replicated environments and having a lot of parity. And ultimately, I think with replicated, the speed at which they can move between the environments, Ian, is much faster. It's really just about kind of the non-technical things, because, replicateds help us streamline that process, even for, on-prem, which is really neat. But I think for some of the more significant changes, maybe like an end user, UX flow, Ian, that could lag a couple weeks. But I think what's great is we really feel like we have the controls to not block the other, 8 customers, where we don't really think that will impact them.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting metric for customer and adoption, right? Like, so they've adopted it, and in what frame did they actually adopt it? Dev, test, or production, and kind of watching it, how quickly it can progress from one to the next ends up being a really interesting adoption metric.
All right, what changes can a software vendor make to improve their adoption metrics? Dex, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. I mean, so we've seen there's a little bit around cadence that we've talked about. The more often you release, the harder it is to keep people on the last 3 versions. We've seen some folks have success where they really want to push the envelope here and release every 2 weeks to all their on-prem customers. And the way they've been able to do that successfully, whether through replicated or not, is by they happen to use the replicated feature, but by enabling automatic updates, so that every time they release, if it's a Semver patch or a minor version update, the instance will just take the update and install it automatically. We've seen that works great for Chrome. So if you can have, if you can ensure that those updates are always going to go smoothly, this is where it comes into like having really, really strong upgrade success rate. Then you can usually, like, those are the areas to invest, is, automatic updates, really clean, really good upgrade success rate. And, the more often you ship, the more people get in the habit of updating, and the smaller your updates are, the less likely something is to go wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes back to our last discussion too, right? Is just trust. If you get that trust high that you're not going to break things, you'll see adoption flow really quickly, right? Maybe they're even willing to turn on that automatic updates button where things just start flowing through, which is where you see really incredible adoption metrics, right? If your customers trust you that much that they're willing to press that button and just say you can ship signed software straight into my environment, then you're going to see awesome adoption metrics.
It's super funny, Ian, because we use that. So we use that internally for how we like use Opal. So my goal would be like, at least we trust ourselves in these early stages, you know, with that button. And I'd love to see more of our self-hosted customers, you know, get there. And then honestly, you almost have effectively SaaS at that point, right? I mean, there's, you know, things you have to manage, Kubernetes compatibility and a few things, Dex, but it's such a small list. And then you effectively have sort of almost the same, you know, delivery model, and especially if someone wanted to, you know, enable like feature flags, it is, you know, effectively the same. And I think from my view, Dex and Andrew, there's a lot that I do to help the product team on, you know, just training and enablement. And if you build things people want and they're not broken, people adopt them. That's the simple. I think as you grow, Andrew, you really have to look at that because you're getting so much data. But in the early stages, you know, for us, that's 100% what we're laser focused on.
I'll add one thing to that list. Maybe it's two, but transparency and really good communications, I think, help quite a bit. So you can be transparent and communicate and talk about, here are the upcoming changes, here's the release schedule that we usually go by, giving your customers the heads up that things are coming down, as opposed to just saying, here's the release, take it kind of thing, where it's help them out if you could, like, so that they can also, you know, with their own internal scheduling and planning, you know, expect a release to come out this month and expect these are the changes, and they're probably going to then be able to plan and resource for that review, and then hopefully that should also speed up, you know, their adoption cycle at the same time.
I think we're at time, but I'll ask one final question here. How does improving adoption impact security?
Well, I'll say from kind of very tactical perspective, if you're a vendor and you're releasing new software that perhaps has security patches or fixes in it, you're going to want your customers to take it as quickly as possible, obviously, to help mitigate, reduce those risks out there. So that's definitely going to have a direct impact on security within all of your customer environments. Yeah.
And I would say for us, you know, obviously we have our own AppSec to worry about, you know, Andrew, around CVs and stuff, but considering, you know, we are a security product, our ability to, again, find things people care about, train them on them and deliver it. And, you know, those outcomes that I talked about, reducing the level of access, you know, that people have and being more productive doing it, the faster we can get that to our customers, the more internally, Andrew, they can go tell folks like their CISO, you know, hey, we reduced, you know, 60% of administrative access with Opal, and we use this new feature to understand our access in a better way. And then, you know, Andrew, we can say, hey, all of our customers that have adopted this, you know, have done X, Y, and Z with these metrics. Here's what this can do for you too. Then I think that becomes really some, it's just so objective, like when you're kind of selling it, you know, that way. That can even be a huge revenue driver, you know, as sort of like a lagging part of that, Andrew.
Absolutely. And it goes back to the conversation of trust. The more we can help build trust in products, the more often they're going to be able to take those adoption, more often to adopt it and take those upgrades.
Yeah, I think it's one of the single biggest things you can do to impact your security too, honestly, like keeping your software up to date. Like, you know, almost everything, you know, when you hear, when you see a CVE, you know, the latest, if you've kept to date to the latest version, quite often they've already been patched because it was like, you know, it's being disclosed later. So if you can keep your software like in that within 6 month updated, there's a whole class of CVEs that are disclosed that you're going to entirely avoid. So
very true.
Folks, I have to drop,
Yep.
but I just wanted to thank you all so much for having me on today. Replicated, again, has been a huge, you know, accelerator for us, Andrew, and just how we've been able to deliver, you know, cloud and self-hosted seamlessly. And in doing that, we can focus more on what matters, like the high value things that came out in this conversation. So again, it was awesome, you know, being on the panel with you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
for joining
Thanks.
us.
I think that takes us to time, Mario.
Yes, it does.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today.